that was here yesterday. I thought it was really interesting, some really good work. I like to call myself a creative technologist, but I'm also, what I do as a job really is I'm a founder and I run a small digital agency in the south of England called Brighton. In Brighton, sorry, called Digicave. Yeah. I don't run Brighton. No, I don't. Yeah. If you asked our clients what we do, they would say that we make mobile marketing digital experiences. But our opinion is that we do something much more important than that. And hopefully, when I go through the lecture over this next hour, you'll agree with me. Before I kind of go into too much further, I'd like to sort of start with what has been probably one of my favorite or greatest inspirations since I got into working with media or digital in general. I actually did my degree in visual communication in Edinburgh College of Art. Boo Hiss, I think, is it rivalry? I don't know, with Napier, I'm not sure. But I don't know if many of you guys know about this allegory. It's my favorite allegory. It's the allegory of Plato's cave. It's stood the test of time as being pretty important in terms of how it talks about human condition and how we experience, how we communicate with each other, how we can understand each other. For those of you who don't know the allegory, I'll give you a brief explanation to the best way I can. Basically, the allegory, which was written about a few thousand years ago, and don't worry, the whole lecture is not going to be about Plato, is about this concept where you have these people that are locked in a cave, chained in a cave, and for their whole lives. Above their head are these puppets, and you can see up here in the slide, this is an old picture in the 1600s that was done. And all they can see of the world, their whole reality is basically composed merely of shadows that are projected by the light of the lantern that's behind these puppets or objects. And the allegory goes that a free-thinking man or a philosopher manages to escape the chains of this cave and goes outside and sees that the world is much more than just shadows that he's been previously presented with. And it's made of color and form and smell. And he comes back to tell these guys about it, but of course they have no reference to or understand what he means. So basically they think he's crazy. I like to believe the allegory continues and the philosopher decides to invent the magic lantern to help explain what the outside world looks like. It puts a magic lantern that projects colorful images, colorful paintings, then perhaps one day invents the photographic slideshow and shows a little bit more of what he's managed to see in the outside world. And getting to the current day and age where motion pictures, they're in a cinema, yet still chained into the cinema, so it's pretty gruesome. And today I'd like to chat about what that next step would be. What is that next step after the motion picture as a way of describing the world around us to ourselves? Right, so I've just got to click the right way. Before I go too much further down that road, the other key inspiration that's been that I've had through the journey that I'll take you through is the concept by Marshall McLuhan of the idea. Well, the idea of the media is the message. It's a very complicated concept, but it is fascinating to think that the stories you read in books or even the stories you watch in the movies are not the only messages that are actually coming through to you. The actual mediums upon which those stories are held have messages in their own right. And that's something that's really interesting in a day and age where more and more different types of mediums are coming into being because of the variety of technologies that are coming to existence that I'm sure you guys are quite aware of. Getting back to my main drive, I think there's a well-known assumed progression in media in how we capture and represent the world around us. There's this idea that we'll capture the world actually in shape and form and deliver it as a volumetric experience, and you've seen that idea as early as Star Wars with the Princess Leia here, the famous scene where R2-D2 projects not a photograph or a flat image nor a movie, but an actual form of Princess Leia talking to the young Luke and Obi-Wan Kenobi. Similarly, that idea has been around in Star Trek, for example, with the holodeck, where people are actually moving around a capture of the world, not watching it flat on a screen. Sorry. So this is an interesting concept, and people may think that it's maybe gimmickry, that it doesn't have much value for us to progress that way, and I'd like to argue that's very much the contrary to that. And in my company, Digicave, that's what we set out to do. We set out to take that next step, look at completely new ways of capturing the world around us and completely new ways of delivering the experience of the world around us, and also look at means of creating business propositions around that so that we could fund ourselves to continue innovating the technologies we thought were important in making that new type of media. This is, I'll take you through a few choice projects that we've done over the last few years and explain to you how they were done, what the end result was, and why we think they're important. This was a capture we did of Gary Barlow. We did it in his kitchen. Usually our setup, what we tend to use is 3D scanning technologies. We have 60 Nikon D800 cameras, and instead of capturing a flat image, we're trying to, as I said, alluded to with the R2-D2 concept, capture the world in shape and form. And I'll go into the different 3D scanning technologies a little bit later. So here we managed to jimmy rig the whole thing into his kitchen, which is pretty tough. Don't remember, every one of these has got to be in focus, every one of them, and capture him as fast as a photograph. He doesn't have to be there for long himself. Often the celebrities we work with can only be there for like 20 minutes at a time. So it's pretty crucial that the rig and the technologies that you use to capture them can work efficiently and work all the time. So this is not out of the lab stuff. The end result, this was for Hello Magazine during the Jubilee. In fact, the editor of Hello is on the right there, Rosie Nixon. She's just had a baby. Anyone matters? The result was that we then combined that, what we would call a sculpture photograph, with augmented reality. And that combination of those two things was then presented on the front cover of the Jubilee edition for when the Queen was her coronation celebrations, when it was raining all day, I think, if you remember on the news. The output of this is, if you like, it's not a game. There's nothing to do with it. It's not interactivity in the sense that you've maybe become accustomed to, where you press a button or make something happen. The augmented reality is really only serving one purpose. That's to maintain the shape and form that we captured at the original input, if you like. So the result was an incredibly photorealistic image of Gary Barlow popping out of the front cover, and we have an example I could show you at the end. Happy to lend you the iPad that shows this. Now, for the Hello readership, who are not necessarily people who want to play computer games, they aren't necessarily people who are interested in gadgets and gizmos, but they do like Gary Barlow, and 25% of the readers of that edition downloaded it, which was an amazing amount for Hello Magazine, because they've never managed to really engage their guys with digital. That then meant that 25% of their readers had this Hello app in their pockets, and then we built upon that, those experiences over time with push notifications, connecting that audience with the Hello Magazine about things that might happen in the future publications. Another project we did with the Science Museum, which was really quite nice actually, was with James May. And in this instance, it's slightly off-piste for us, because what we did is we captured James May and we created an avatar out of him. And most of you probably know that concept whereby 3D scanning has actually often been used in the video game world just as a mechanism for creating avatars. Our results are a little bit more photoreal, and they stand up to compression a little bit more because of the in-house technologies we've developed. The result was we got a lot of media attention out of it, and the highlight of mobile technology from BBC Click for 2012, which was pretty cool. Here's a video, no sound because it's rubbish, basically. But the bearded man in this is actually the head of Qualcomm. And if you don't know who Qualcomm is, you should if you're in the digital world. They're one of the largest mobile chip manufacturers, and also the guys behind Vuforia, which is one of the main augmented reality platforms that's out there. And the result of that project was, in the Science Museum, you can find a little, still to this day, James May avatar that pops up about 2 foot high on the plinth and tells you about the exhibits in minute detail, which is quite fun. It's great for the kids. People have found that to be fun. And I'll take you to present day. We just finished a major project with Marvel and Disney for the main campaign for Captain America, which was their largest blockbuster this year. And we did the digital mobile marketing app for them. And again, it's very much the same thing. You know, we went over there with our rig. We captured Chris Evans, Samuel Jackson, etc. And as you can see, he was actually captured, you know, in mid-moment, in mid-process. We use a lot of, the company has a lot of backgrounds from special effects, games, and film and TV and stuff. So there is some, the glass, for example, isn't real, etc. And there's obviously some fake elements, but not too dissimilar to your traditional special effects sort of compositing techniques, except in this instance, not only does it have to perform on the mobile platform, but it's also it's in 3 dimensions. So of course the attention to detail is something that is important to be seen from all the way around. And the result is that whoever downloaded the app that we told you on the poster would get this kind of experience from the poster. He's 90 foot tall here, smashing through the billboard in full 3 dimensions. You could walk around this like a giant Statue of Liberty. I think not too dissimilar in size. And you can take photographs, and they had a competition whereby people were taking photographs of them being punched out by Captain America or something like that. Pop an app up on Facebook, and you see the result of that was they'd taken these traditional photo poster material, traditional marketing, and suddenly accessed the world of social networking. We'd use the same photographer that they would for their normal posters. We'd use the same compositing guys for the posters that they usually work, but we just leveraged with our technologies and platform the ability to connect to social networking, and of course everyone went crazy and started to post different pictures of them and cats being hit in the face with Captain America. This is a little video, but you can experience it over there. No, this one's not the video with the sound, but the next one will be, which is funny. So hopefully, but you can see how it appears when you view it. Obviously, it's in photorealism when you see it. So the full 3 dimensions, you know, as you're experiencing it. So capturing and delivering form is really what this is about, and understanding the pipeline, the skill sets, and technologies that are needed to move this forward. This is for the sound, if that's cool. We were lucky enough to be picked up by the Oklahoma News, I think, the weather team. And they posted a video on their Facebook.
We're back here in the Weather Center, and yes, completely nerding out. Okay, here's Captain America. Matt has discovered something insane. Okay, ordinary phone.
Ordinary phone.
Yes.
Nothing special.
Watch his screen on his phone. Okay, hold on. Let me get the focus on yours. Okay, go. What? What?
Moving the laptop.
Oh, I don't even know what's going on.
Captain America busting out of the screen like a boss.
How does it happen? How does it happen? We don't know.
How's it happen?
We're so confused.
How does it work?
What is this?
What is it?
Yeah, that's the response you want to give Disney when they're trying to get you to do their digital marketing campaign. And of course, they posted that totally naturally themselves onto their and use Facebook, which has so many million followers and blah, blah, blah. So what's the business case for that? And we'll move on to more philosophical things a little bit later, which I think are more important. But the business case is we're working with the photographer. We're working with Nels Israelson in that instance, who's a fantastic photographer, 53 years old, probably one of the 5 top photographers for the movie posters in LA. And his fantastic experience with lighting is something that we aim to preserve with our 3D scanning technology. So we're not about replacing that guy. We're about just saying, great, let's use your skills, your capabilities. And we're working with their assets. You've got to remember, when you're looking at marketing, and in our case, that's our business, people are making, with celebrities, people are making big contracts with their celebrities, and they have just so many photo shoots. And then the world of digital happens to them. And the world of digital says, well, I want you to do social networking, I want you to do all this, but that's not in the contracts with their assets. These people they've paid millions of pounds to for so many photo shoots. Now, what we're allowing them to do is take those assets and actually connect those assets to social networking and allow them to tick the box that their management asks them to tick. So we're not trying to replace people, we're trying to leverage, if you like, connect the traditional marketing techniques and bring them to that digital landscape. And that has a lot of value with an industry which is hurting under the pressures of changing. So over the last 6 years, we've worked with a lot of brands that are seen to think that what we're doing is interesting. We still see it very much right at the beginning, and we've had quite a bit of exposure around the philosophy of what it is that we're doing with a lot of the major imaging conferences or broadcast conferences. In fact, in NAB, which is the National Association of Broadcasters, we're nominated the first shape broadcasters, which we take kind of pride in. The concept that when you're capturing something in shape, we have to start completely rethinking the whole delivery system and also how that's going to be experienced. Challenging the status quo is basically that thing. And you guys are working in this whole the whole concept of digital should challenge the status quo, because the tools are so much better than TV and photography that was actually 100 years old. These tools are in flux, and they are so exciting that we should be pressurizing these old systems and really looking at new ways of creating content that are far more exciting than merely putting a movie on your mobile phone. The name we've come up with for this media is Free Viewpoint Media. Not to say that'll stick. There really isn't many people trying to champion this. There's a couple. You see a lot of people have used 3D scanning really as just a tool within a tool chain, and they've not thought of delivering its content in its own right. For us, it's a word that makes sense because it's not like fixed viewpoint media, like photography or motion picture, where your viewpoint is constantly fixed, where you're being shown what to see or when to see it and how long to see it, which we don't think fits the 21st century. All of the things that we've done are the result of trying to look at the whole equation at once and push both the boundaries of the capture as well as the delivery. Because fundamentally, the product of a TV program, when you're watching it, is not the camera that made it, and nor is it the TV screen that you're looking at it. It's everything. It's the TV screen, it's the aerials or whatever it is that's transmitting the picture, it's the screen itself. And if you're looking at trying to really change things, you have to look at the big picture and push the boundaries on every single level at the same time together. And that's what we've been trying to do. It's pretty tricky. It's tricky because the digital platform is a hell of a lot more than your desktop. I mean, the addition of the mobile phone as part of your digital platform has meant that the complexity has increased tenfold with its capabilities, of course. I mean, to give you an idea, each one of these little squares is a handset with a different processor or whatever. So you know, when you're trying to deliver over this in this situation, deliver content that needs to work across all of these handsets, you have a lot of complications that you wouldn't necessarily have when you're working with traditional media. Fundamentally, you suffer from everything being fragmented and non-standardized. Again, you've got to think of the work that's gone into standardization. Companies like SMPTE, not companies, but organizations like SMPTE, the Social Society of Motion Picture Technology Engineers, that get together every quarter, I think it is, and make sure that all the cameramen are shooting in the same kind of codec that can be understood by the editors and can be broadcast over the networks in the right kind of way, and a new codec is going to be compatible with a whole system. That doesn't happen for the digital landscape. There isn't really, I mean, there's people fighting with HTML5, but they're in a corner, underfunded. You've got Apple, which you could say have criticized for trying to be so sort of offish with opening up the system, actually do present a lot of advantage, because you know that your product and content can work on their devices in quite a stable way. And the biggest issue for us in this instance is that we're really pushing these devices to their absolute limit to create these experiences. And when you're doing that, you need access to that low-level hardware. And currently the best way of getting access to that low-level hardware is through an API, the apps, if you like. And I've had very difficult conversations with top marketing management of Disney to try and explain to them that we can't guarantee that it's going to work on everybody's mobile phone. That's tricky. How many TV adverts do you think would be made if you had to have an explanation to the car manufacturer that even though the TV advert works today, it might not work when it comes out? That's tricky. So these are big areas that need to be worked in and pushed forward. Third-party dependencies are a hell of a thing too. When you're connecting with social networking, which we are doing in a big way and trying to increase that as a product, and you're trying to use it in marketing, which is it's all about reach, really. You have to have contracts that basically stipulate that there's nothing you can do if Facebook decides to change their API rules the day before the movie comes out, which can happen. So it's a complex world where even the legal documents that you're building become innovative products. And it's constantly changing. So I have arguments with my developers on a regular basis where they tell me why one of my ideas won't work. I tell them I know it won't work. I want to know what are all the different things that will make it not work. I want to know if any of those things that are going to mean it doesn't work means I have to have a conversation with Qualcomm or whatever to find out when it will work, and then we can plan for that, and then we can talk to our partners, because frankly sometimes it takes about 18 months to get one of these projects out into the public. And if you take that into account and you take the speed at which new handsets and digital devices are coming out, you really have a hell of a work on your hands to make sure that you develop those business relationships and understand what's just around the corner, what are going to be the capabilities, and actually create content sometimes that you nail-bitingly isn't going to work yet. Which is also scary as hell, but exciting, as some other people would call it. But why do it? Because it's amazing. Bottom line is, these new devices are absolutely incredible. We've gone past that threshold of having a screen in a living room, which is just a tap where you turn it on and the content floods out into your eyes. Now what's happening is you have the screen knows where you are, how you're looking at it, what you're looking at it, when you're looking at it, and all of these types of these bits of information can give way to the kind of content that we've been creating, and much more. So it is worth it. It's just hard. So if you've got this great device and you've got this great a platform that's incredibly exciting. When you put motion pictures on it, to me it feels like you're putting pram wheels on a spaceship. It just doesn't make sense. Or it's like everyone's got a color TV nowadays, and we're putting black and white images on it. You know, the technology that exists today with 3D scanning allows us to capture the world in a way that is much more native to these devices. It means we can use the power of these devices with the power of these new capture technologies, which are just burgeoning and just beginning, to start to create these new experiences. I'm going to show you a few videos now. This is from 2011, and this is to help you understand what 3D scanning means and is. Fundamentally, it's hopefully this won't have sound. Hey? Yeah, cool. Yeah. Oh, I fast forward there. Is it? It's got a pause when it starts, so let me just count the many clicks. 3D scanning, for those of you who don't know, I mean, maybe I've been jumping ahead, but I'm not too sure. It's a mechanism of actually sensing the depth of a pixel. So not just the color, the RGB, but also how far it is. This is stuff from Kinect Fusion that illustrates 3D scanning being used with a projection scanning technology. There's many different types of scanning technologies. We primarily use photogrammetry, and in this instance it's using projection mapping with an invisible infrared pattern. But you can see here 3D scanning working, and it illustrates quite well that there's a form being created at the back end of it, a shape, if you like. In the Kinect, it's being used as a means of sort of registering your gestures. So kids can play with the Kinect in a different way, play with video game characters. You've probably heard of the Google Streetcar project. Well, this is what the car is seeing, and it's using 3D scanning to be able to not see these things around it as images, but to see them as shapes and forms. And in doing so, it's able to make better judgment about what to do and how many cyclists to run over. And then, really, one of the first places 3D scanning came from was the architectural world. For years, the surveyor would have to go around with laser pointers to work out the distance of arches. See if this is going to go. Yeah. And obviously, with 3D scanning, what's happened is people are able to essentially scan an entire building and then measure the distances after the fact with a very high degree of accuracy. And this is a typical example of an architectural 3D scan. But for me, it doesn't interest me. That's been going on for 30 years, and all of those different ways of using 3D scanning is using them as just a tool within a tool chain, and I find it to be a terrible waste. You've got to remember that the Lumiere brothers actually saw the motion picture camera, maybe one of its business uses, as a means of counting how many laborers went to work every day. It was George Méliès, really, who understood what the motion picture camera could do and make it into a content experience. And it was through that that drove the technologies of motion picture cameras to the video cameras that we know, and then in turn became useful to the medical world and the scientific projects that were being used, and the instruments perhaps that beamed the pictures back from the moon. So we should never underestimate the value and of the content industry and entertainment as a mechanism of driving innovation, and it's absolutely something that's being ignored. So 3D scanning, just as a tool in a tool chain, for me was a waste, and that's where our work comes in. We believe it's a medium in its own right, and that's the sort of lonesome voice that we have at the moment. That it actually, and when you start to think of it that way, you have to think of it. You have to think of all the different challenges that come with it. You have to think, well, if you look at a video or a cameraman today, in news cameraman, he doesn't use a scientific camera, you know, to film the news. He uses a broadcast camera, which has got the right controls near his hand in the right kind of way. It's got the right type of functionality for his uses when it's being used as a tool in its own right. And similarly, 3D scanning is it has the same necessities behind it. At the moment, it's basically a lab tool. And when refined for a lab tool, it works well in that condition. But when you're trying to use it as an artistic medium, there's many more technological solutions that need to be had. Many more different approaches, if you like, that need to be had to successfully achieve that. So I'll show you some of our stuff. This is one of our shots done for an advert with Cat a couple of years ago, and the result of which is one of our scans that I'll show you here on the video. So unlike the, well, let's hope it exists. Yeah, here we go, great. So unlike the Kinect, where you had to move the Kinect around, obviously, thanks to our system, you've captured it all at once in an instant, so you can capture that moment. Of course, that means you're capturing at the speed of a frame. Obviously, the evolution of this is going to become motion, so it's important that you did. And we captured the real light, so that's not algorithms working on that leather to make that leather look like that. That's actually the light that was captured at the point of time of the photograph or the image. And again, thanks to our approach, if you like, the detail that we can achieve is far higher than anything else that you get in the games industry, because we're coming down from a top-down approach. This is not algorithms that are showing the light sub-scattering surface detail. These are actually the surface of the skin of that old man shot with very, very high detail. It's in combining these technologies together that we create that new experience and that different approach, if you like. It's probably a slide too many on that concept. But it's very, very early days. And hopefully people that would be interested in getting into this can understand that this is just the flickering beginning of motion picture. You know, transport yourself back 100 years, you know, when movies were 10 seconds of a train coming into a tunnel. And that's exactly where this content is. It's extremely early days. It takes a lot of work to make it happen. There's a lot of cameras we have to use. It's bulky. Of course, that's not where it's going to stay. So it's very exciting to get involved in it, to start to think of it as a medium in its own right, and how you could contribute as a new medium, and how you could drive it forward to become much more exciting than it currently is, as just a mere marketing material for some big budget movie. Of course, we hope that fundamentally the kids are going to enjoy the posters we do in the lobby better than the movies one day, and then we'll change that. So this comes to the sort of my favorite part of what this whole thing, which is why do it? What's the philosophical reason for it, other than, you know, industry? If it's a new industry, of course, there's new jobs. There's new work for people developing the tools. The science, as I explained before, in computer vision, I believe would be advanced faster, because the content industry is a hungry beast. If it becomes an important part of the content industry, you can bet your bottom dollar it's going to speed up far quicker than the Kinect game that it currently is. The other reason why you could say you were doing it is it's just the natural evolution of things. You know, we had image first, and then, you know, it moved, and then we added color, and now there's shape. That's maybe another reason. But for me, it's because there's the chains of the current media are so strict. As I said before, fixed viewpoint media, photography and motion picture, which we surround ourselves with for every single day, it's 15 years of our lives we spend watching TV, apparently, I found out, which is amazing. And during all of that time, you are being shown what to look at, when to look at it, in which order to look at things, for how long. I used to work as a television editor for about 5 years and worked for BBC, Al Jazeera, Sky, and this is kind of where one of my pet hates. I understood that I was upholding the social norms behind what is beautiful, what isn't beautiful, when to look at it, I knew how to make someone cry by pulling up the music at the right time and a focus pull at another time. I was making decisions about what was important about when someone walked into a room. You know, was it their body language? Was it the shoes they wore? Was it their hairstyle? I was making those decisions for millions of people all the time. I believe, actually, that that's decisions other people can make for themselves. What do you find important when someone walks into a room? What do you want to look at? Is it their hairstyle? Is it their body language? These are all decisions that are being made for you for 15 years of your life. It's a very vicarious experience when you're watching TV. Now, it's not to say that we can't make content, that you can't have wonderful drama being played out, but to force you to look at certain things is an art form in its own right, but it shouldn't be the only way of experiencing the captured world around us. Photography famously doesn't work the way perception works. If everyone understands perception, it's the mind's eye view. We don't look at the world in flat images. The world isn't flat. And finally, the motion picture, for me, tells one of the strongest lies that is doing a lot of damage to this world, which is this concept that we live in a movie, that we live in a sequence of events that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's just so not true. The world has many events happening all the time at the same time with each other, interacting with each other all at the same time. Context is never ending. There is always a context behind why anything happens, and motion pictures and movies always tries to answer sometimes where there are no answers. So when we have a medium that might capture or document a picnic scene, for example, or a prison yard, and allow you to have a look at what's going on in that prison yard and understand, look back, reverse in time and see why that fight happened, or who he was looking at when he got angry or when she cried. When you get given those opportunities of viewing the world around us with that kind of control and freedom, we can learn, perhaps, we can make context, the meaning behind medium. So what does the future kind of hold? For me, it's not just little gimmicks like the marketing stuff, which are the baby steps of this media. For me, it is bringing forth context, a very important story to the forefront of society, to understand that we blame a little less, philosophical reasons like that, but also to make interactive entertainment like for the masses. And that sounds like an oxymoron, but you've got to remember the interactive entertainment is fundamentally upheld by the video games industry. And although it's beating the music industry and the film industry, it's only really mostly boys from 8 to 35 that are paying for the video games. There's 3/4 of the population that are not being served by the interactive entertainment industry. Thinking of interactive entertainment like the Milan catwalk that could be downloaded by someone who enjoys fashion on their Xbox One, using all the technologies that you would usually use to play a video game, but to experience that event in a way you couldn't even if you were there, or a football match that you would download not to play the players, but to experience that football match in a way which was even better than if you were at the stadium. And the concepts and ideas go further and go beyond that, whether it was nature programs or whether it was a ballet or opera playing on in your front living room in a way, captured in a way that video just really can't. Would that appeal to your grandparents? Would that appeal to the other demographics that are being left out of the interactive entertainment experience? My belief is it would. And there we go. Thanks very much. So yeah, if anyone's interested in asking questions, go ahead. Otherwise, I've got an iPad so I can show a couple of things live if you're interested.
I've got a question.
Oh, good. So okay.
Well, I'm interested in you hinting at the Princess Leia type.
Yes.
Experience.
Yes.
And as far as I understand it, there is down this 3D projection stuff going on.
Going on, yeah, that's right.
Which uses water spray and little.
That's right. And there's plasma as well, where it burns the plasma in three-dimensional.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. So that sounds like a fairly small step from you taking lots of pictures,
Absolutely.
right? And then just being able to project onto.
Well, that's right, and
3D.
it's a kind of a chicken and egg situation that we see to get across that thing. You've got some fantastic innovation and work being done in volumetric displays, which is, you know, and there's a variety of different ways that people are tackling that issue, but there's not really much content being made that would be suitable for volumetric displays. So what we're trying to do really is not only create the content from the volumetric displays, but create the business case for the baby step that is currently possible today, so that we can create, hopefully get more competition and create, you know, more development in this area, for this reason, if that makes sense.
So is your vision of a little display on the, you know, coffee table in the living room, and you go, everyone stands up and walks around?
Well, I think you could have.
Is it more that you've got it on a TV and you control?
Well, I think
like a, you know,
yes.
Rig, you control the angle at which you're looking.
Well, I would suggest that it's kind of in steps, really, because I would really enjoy. We've been talking with World Wildlife Fund, for example, with setting up a permanent rig around a water hole, so that you would have and you'd get a ping notification on your iPad, which would just tell you that an animal has arrived at the watering hole. In which case, you'd use your iPad in this situation to see, you know, the lion at the watering hole in the middle of your lounge, and thus you'd continue to donate to maintain that little area that is important to the trust. And in those instances, I do think like a wonderful volumetric display would be really enjoyable, that you'd be walking around. But I think there's still a lot of value for, you know, overcoming the issues with stereoscopic content. I mean, 3D stereoscopic movies don't work. I did a talk in IBC in 2011 on the future of 3D, basically alongside actually Howard Luck from Disney, specifically undermining him about how the technologies of 3D stereoscopy is impossible. You have two cameras that are fixed, and you have images left and right eyes being given to over 500 different people sitting in the room from different areas. Let's choose a different technology, because that's just not going to work. And this obviously means compromises have to be made in how you create the content. The 3D experience gets compromised. People don't actually see as if looking through a window. It doesn't work. Technologies like what we're talking about can even aid in that area. So if people are interested in still sitting back, looking through essentially a window, then you'd have a better view of that. But at the same time, the idea of virtual objects through Google Glass becoming valuable to you and coexisting with you in your lounge or something, you know, so your friend comes around and automatically can see all the virtual objects in the Lamborghini you've got parked on your desk through his Google Glasses, or third version thereof, also shows how volumetric content is going to be important in the near future.
I was going to ask, you seem to gloss a little bit over one of the interesting slice of the technology stack for you, and it seems like a really difficult problem you solve with the capturing a 2D image and being able to, an arbitrary 2D image, be able to work out where to then project the 3D image onto. That seems like a problem.
So that's using photogrammetry, really. I mean, I'll take you back to something so I can illustrate whilst. So basically, each one of these cameras will work out a little bit like how your brain works, you know, in the sense it will create three-dimensional spot. So the images are different in each camera, and so it'll see a pixel, a color pixel, and this one will recognize the same pixel through pattern recognition in computer vision. And knowing the distance that the pixels have moved, we'll be able to triangulate that to create a point in space. And what you end up with is a point cloud. I should have really brought up a slide that showed the different stages. The point cloud, there are many open source algorithms that can then turn this starry object, which is what it looks like in that part of the process, into a solid polygonal form that might be useful for reprojecting the texture. We use our own algorithms that actually combine two different photogrammetry techniques. One which is more basic and basically uses the cameras and uses the silhouettes of the form to create a basic form, and then deforms that with the photogrammetry data. That becomes more robust. And then the other side of the algorithms we use, which are very unique for us, is the way we treat the actual natural light. Fundamentally, we're coming from a top-down point of view. As I was saying before, you've got 3D scanning tends to go from the bottom up. So when you're using 3D scanning for video games or special effects, you're looking at capturing the surface of the things, getting some reference for the color, and then you want that surface to be so good that you can relight it. Paul Dubevik, who we've worked with over in UCL, his speciality is trying to detect the textural surface, you know, so that he can algorithmically, so that they can work out how that surface should refract the light. Does that make sense? So that what's going to happen when light bounces on it. But I've argued with him that basically there's a flaw in the philosophy of trying to use algorithms for light, is that you've always got this finite element to algorithms, obviously. And the photorealism that we get is a product of the fact that instead of using algorithms that are going to bounce on a surface that was created by algorithms and then create an image, we have the only place we have algorithms is the thing that's creating the surface, but it's capturing the actual light that's on that surface. So that maintains, that's one less degree of artificiality that maintains the photorealism. Anyone else? Hi.
I was wondering, with technologies such as Google Glass
Yeah.
and Oculus Rift
Yeah.
become more commercially available in the mass market,
Absolutely.
I was wondering if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on how you see the future of this technology maybe in the next decade or so.
Yeah, I mean, no one could be happier than us to see Oculus Rift being bought by Facebook, to be honest, because the message it sends to the investors is great. You know, I mean, the world is run by the money men fundamentally, you know, and it takes years for them to catch up with what you know is right if you're right in the middle of it. And give you an example, 3 years ago, they really didn't, you know, people like Deloitte or PricewaterhouseCoopers, who are the guys that analyze markets and business trends, you know, didn't give two halfpenny to digital, really, not as a world, you know, market for advertising. They were still heavily invested and showed that, you know, traditional marketing techniques and going to be here to stay for a long time to come. And then 1 year later, 5% of the spend in advertising went onto digital and got 26% visibility. And it's really enjoyable to see the panic that's created. But it means the opportunity is there, really, for anyone working in digital. It means that you've just got panicked people working in London that have no clue what to do. And if you can hold their hands even just a tiny bit, you've got a job. But in terms of the Oculus Rift, that's just compounded that even more, because we were going in there with our architectural clients, Land Securities, with a lower grade version of something like the Oculus Rift about 3.5 years ago, and they were kind of interested, but they couldn't bite because it just sounded too outlandish. And even though it was a better experience and it was fantastic, and it meant they didn't have to take the models, the maquettes they did to China to sell, you know, they just couldn't get over it because they were scared and worried. And so when these things happen, like Google going behind Google Glass, it gives a real power to markets like augmented reality, and it helps those clients take that step and, you know, spend £200,000 on your crazy project.
You have a 3D video holography machine coming to Edinburgh this summer. That's part of the Edinburgh Art Festival, something that we've been working on for a couple of years.
Cool.
Just trying to get the displays right. It's a scary mother of a thing because
Yeah.
it spin very, very fast.
Love it.
But I'm interested to see, because it's persistence of vision when
Yes.
it comes down to it.
In that instance, yeah.
But in the context of it, it's called Help Me Obi, the project.
Yes.
But in the context of having this, for example, this person here in the display.
Yeah, we'd give it to you, yeah.
But however, you need another camera to track where the person's head is to actually change the image.
Oh, is that how you're doing it? But why use then a volumetric display then? Because surely...
What you've got is you've got a 3D model. They're using Voyager as the model. I haven't seen this yet.
And they have face-to-head tracking as well?
The artists originally did it with their child when they were born.
Okay, for stereoscopic then, I see, yeah.
Picture, so the baby's floating in
yeah.
there, and you can walk around it. but obviously the image is not doing anything.
Yeah.
You get this sense of shape and form
Yeah.
and depth, and you can see through it. It has transparency, but it doesn't know where you are, so therefore it's not doing anything. And that'll be the next stage.
Yes.
But the key thing was, obviously this is a huge array in terms of this kind of time slicing situation.
That's right. We're our sister company, Time Slice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When can we do it live?
Well, I mean,
How much processing is involved?
Great question. Basically, we've devoted our time to creating the capture as fast as a photograph, as instant as a frame with no motion blur. And that was tough. This is why the person backflipping is important. As you can imagine, these cameras are 36 megapixels, roughly equates to 8K if it's a video camera. So we're working with known kind of a situation where obviously you place all those with video cameras and you start getting motion. 4 years ago, it took 5 hours for one frame. No, that's not true. 12 probably. But then we CUDA optimized and all this type of stuff, and we get it down to about an hour. So you're into the land of Pixar in the early days, in terms of making any kind of content that could move, and a very expensive budget in capturing. Complexities arrive around when you have obstructed views of things and this type of stuff that really needs a concerted effort between AI and also, I mean, motion gives you some advantages because you're able to, let's just give you an example. Imagine if I had my hand in front of my face for one of the frames and then I moved my hands away. So I obstructed my face for some of the time. Then it's actually very easy using technologies similar to the Connect Fusion code that allows you to at least put the computer's mind's eye view of what that obstructed surface should be like, even though it can't be seen. But there's a hell of a lot of challenges, and the biggest thing we're working on is actually going one step further and using what we call multi-method. It's been a one-horse race for a long time, people choosing single technologies one at a time, deciding that that's the best, or this is the best, or that is the best. And actually, when you look at the complexities of measuring depth, if you use infrared, skin doesn't reflect it very well. Certain surfaces, colors won't reflect it very well. Green, for example, obviously. Photogrammetry very much depends on high-frequency detail. When there's no high-frequency detail, it can't tell you where the surface is. So think of a balloon or something like that would be pretty tricky. And so then you've got light field, which is fundamentally confined by the same technologies that confines all the imaging technologies, which is the silicon chip, which every time the silicon chip gets this much bigger, photogrammetry can see this much more detail. But the light field camera is always held back because it still uses that same sensing technology. Light field is when it actually measures the actual light angles and infers the distance. So our approach has been to move things forward for motion, to make it even more automated, is to start looking at combining a few of these technologies together as one and have them talk to each other. And that becomes an interesting mechanism that can move things into motion more easily.
This would explain why Star Wars R2-D2's display is a bit crap.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
But it's a bit like how we accept the fact that we want streaming content, therefore we accept a slightly lower pixel rate.
That's right.
It's kind of like you want immediacy, therefore you actually have to downgrade the quality, which would explain, therefore, even in the world of Star Wars, they could quite get it right.
Well, we had an interesting limit though, which was we had this augmented reality working 4 years ago on mobile phones, but obviously we just couldn't push enough textual information, so it just wasn't photoreal. Without it being photoreal, what was the point? It looked like a video game character that wasn't moving. So, it's interesting steps that happened, when something actually becomes a real experience, or that people can buy it as a real experience. I think the thing is with all of this is that we need to understand the long-term vision, but we also need to grasp and firmly the smaller baby steps that are going to enable those long-term visions. I mean, you would be disgusted at the success that banner ad companies have in London, whose sole innovation is to take the adverts from TV adverts and strip them out of some of their CGI assets to make them viewable in a long rectangular format. We need to take that same, sometimes ambitious visions and things like this are too ambitious and so ambitious they don't even help themselves in the now. And so it's important to also analyze where the values are in business for what we do actually have and are capable of doing now, because the solutions really come from, in my belief, lots of people working together. And many people forget just how many hundreds of thousands, millions even, of PhD students work behind, you know, increasing the capability of vision sensors, you know, whose entire PhDs are involved around one tiny little improvement. And these are funded by some of the big imaging sensing companies in the world. And this here has just hardly anybody caring about it. So the most important job we can do is get people to care about it, and then the rest can follow, because then more people can see that they've got value in getting, you know, working in this business, if that makes sense. Anyone else? Any more questions?
Thank you so much, Callum.
Cool. I hope that was all right. Awesome. Thank you.
I think Callum's going to, you got your iPad.
Yep, that's